A very interesting discussion, ladies and gentlemen, and I think we learned a thing or two. It really opened up our eyes, at least eyes of the civilians. Colonel David's looking at me like, well, I know, but I suppose the rest of us don't. So thank you so much for that. We now move on to environmental wellness, and again, Dr. Anbumani Ramdas had touched upon this in his keynote speech earlier this morning. I'm very excited to announce that we have with us Faye D'Souza, who is a multi-award winning journalist who, along with her team, has built a reputation for reliable, verified, and non-partisan news updates on social media. She has been the recipient of several awards, both for her journalism and overall positive impact. Faye was the youngest woman journalist in India to have led any national news channel as executive director and has now launched a news app called Beatroot News. Please put your hands together for Faye D'Souza.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you for having me here, Colonel Saab. It is a pleasure to be part of this gathering. It's particularly difficult to follow the speakers who have just, come down from the stage because of the work that you do and the contribution that you make. It's impossible to sort of follow that with any sort of contribution. I must start with an apology. I was asked to talk about environmental wellness. I found myself at a loss. I'm not an environmentalist and I'm not an expert on wellness, so I had nothing to say. So with the permission of the Colonel, I've asked that I talk about something that's closer to my experience. Because you know how we learn from our mistakes, right? So I thought if I share my story, you can learn from my mistakes and that will save you some time. So the word I'm going to focus on today is the word enough. In Tamil we say podam, especially if you're at like a Kalyan Sapadu, you say, no, podam. I'm from Bangalore where we say saku. And in Hindi, across the country, you would say bas, bahut ho gaya. Now, it would be easy to assume that in a wellness conversation we're talking about how much food we should have, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm going to talk about my journey and how I understood the meaning of the word enough. And what I learned, and I hope that that would mean something that you could take home today as well. So I'm also going to leave this up here, if we could, the word enough, because if I overshoot my time, or if I bore you, you can say enough to me in 6 different languages, which is what is up on the screen. So if you can keep that up there, please. Thank you. So to give you a quick recap of my journey, I spent 17 years in news television. When I started my career as a reporter on the ground, it was very cool to be a news reporter. If someone asked you what you did and you said, I'm a reporter in TV, they'd be like, wow, that's not the case anymore. Towards the end of my time in television, I had a job that I absolutely loved. I was heading a channel. I had a team of really young, really driven people. We were doing amazing work and we had a mandate to be the voice of the people. As a journalist, that is such a luxury. If someone says, you be the voice of the people in an environment where everybody is picking a politician to side, we got to speak on behalf of the people, and it was a really great place to be. It was also a job that I gave everything to. All of my time, all my energy, all my health, all the time that I should have been spending with family, my Sundays, my weekends, my late nights, everything I gave to this job. This job was my whole world. And we were really good at it. We did some amazing work. We campaigned to abolish tax on sanitary napkins so that women in other parts of the country have access to sanitary napkins. We campaigned for housing for the poor. We campaigned for safety for women in cabs. We did a lot of work that was really close to the ground. But around 2019, it got too hot in the kitchen. And the people I was working with started telling me that, don't take this story, don't ask this question, don't push this point too much, don't do this show, don't interview this person. And I was faced on one hand with this lovely job that I really loved, that was everything to me, and the team that I was working with, and the access to crores and crores of equipment and studios, and the access to reach your living rooms every night through the show. And on the other hand, my integrity. I chose my integrity. I left that job. And I said, enough. Thank you, sir. It was not easy enough to say because we're not trained like that. From the time we are very young, and I grew up in Bangalore, I'm South Indian, from the time we're very young, we are sort of told that how successful you are is directly related to how much value you have. What is your designation? What do you do for a living? How much you earn? And so suddenly I felt a lot of anxiety because I didn't know who I was anymore. Who was I if I didn't have that designation? Would anybody take my call? Would anybody want to work with me? Would anybody give me an interview? Was I enough? Was I enough? Am I good enough? You know, there's actually a phobia. There's a name for this. It's called altiophobia, if I'm saying it right. It is the fear of imperfection. It's the fear that you are not perfect, that you're not enough, that you will not be loved. It doesn't matter how much you do. Women will understand this, that it doesn't matter how much you do, it's not enough. So this whole question that we keep asking ourselves, am I enough? Am I successful enough? Do I have enough money? Do I have enough employees? Do I have enough car? Will my kids be happy? Will my spouse be happy? Will my employees be happy? Will people love me? And now with social media, that question has been thrown open to the world to decide that you are not enough. I had crippling anxiety about the fact that my life was over. And I would not find a way forward from here. And I had made this horrible mistake from walking away from this job. And with the help of a therapist on a wellness conclave, I must say, I acknowledge, I regularly see someone, I recommend it to everybody. We must have someone to talk to. Like we talk to a doctor, when you have a family doctor who knows you, you have to have someone who understands you mentally as well. This person gave me an exercise, which I love homework, so I did it really well, where I had to sit down and decide what I want to be when I grow up. Do I want to be a journalist? Is there anything else I can do? What I want my contribution to society to be, what I want my legacy to be. So I sat and wrote it down. And I focused on the word dignity. And I realized that what was missing in that entire story I had told you up till then was dignity. When you work in television, there is a severe lack of dignity, which I'm sure you're familiar with if you switch on your TVs right now. There's no dignity for the journalist, or for the guest who's speaking, or even for the audience who's watching. There's a severe lack of the way that is done. And that's why it's such a high pressure situation, because your TRPs mean everything, and in order to get your TRPs, you have to constantly break news, you have to constantly yell and shout, you have to constantly seem like there is something happening even when there is something not happening. I'll tell you a secret about television channels. They pick up a story and break it again every 2 hours to show that there is something breaking, because otherwise how can you have breaking news all the time? So that pressure of living in that environment is toxic, it's unhealthy, and mostly it's undignified. So I decided at that point that it's okay if it's just me. And I have a cell phone and I have access to social media. I will do one story a day, but I will do it with dignity. And I will treat my audience with dignity. And we'll write it in a way that is dignified. And from there I started. At that point I had 30,000 people following me on Instagram, after which a few other journalists joined me. Through COVID, we worked very hard on being able to provide accurate, unemotional, respectful, dignified information to people. As we stand today, we're at 1.6 million followers on Instagram. From doing work with dignity. But there's one step more that we did this time around. My team and I take weekends off so that we get enough rest. And we spend time with our families so we have enough grounding when we do our work. We also take time to look after our health and our mental wellness so that we have enough stamina to keep going and we don't burn out. We have 1.6 million, we've launched an app that has 1 lakh downloads. We've got enough hope also now, going forward, to believe that we're onto something. And we can actually create a brand that will change the way news is done in this country, and maybe one day change the country itself. We have enough optimism. But there's something that I've never shared before that I'm tempted to share now, because this is the first time I'm talking about wellness. After changing the way I balance my life, after finding time for family, finding time for myself, balancing the way I deal with my work, last year, in spite of being told my whole life that I could never have children, I was blessed with a baby. It was a miracle I did not expect. And to me, it was maybe the universe's way or God's way of telling me that I am enough. And I no longer have to ask that question. And so my learning that I want to share with you today about the word enough, for the saako, bas, is that we have to all find our own enough. General Sahib said that he prays. The other General Sahib said he walks. Everybody has something that balances you out. And in India, I think our general love language is food, right? So the question that we ask each other is, Sapraicha, have you eaten enough? It's how we tell each other that we love each other, that we care about your well-being. So I'm asking you today, have you slept enough? Have you dreamt enough? Have you meditated enough? Have you walked enough? Have you played with your children or your grandchildren enough? Have you laughed enough today? Have you hoped enough? Have you felt enough ambition? When you're sitting here today, do you feel enough kinship for the people you're sitting with? I think that wellness, on some level, as we live our lives that are so demanding, where we all want to be the perfect professional, the most successful person, the perfect spouse, the perfect parent, the perfect child, is to also find out what is enough for you and how to hit that balance and how we can continue to be successful and continue to be there for the people who love us and for the people we love if we find a way to hit that balance of enough. Thank you.
I was just saying I was as mesmerized as the rest of the crowd and happy for her to go on, and then I realized, okay, she's done. All right, Dr. Renu, request you to please join me on stage and present a memento to Faye. We are so, so thankful to have you here with us. I think all of the audience are your fans. So once again, it's an honor. Dr. Renu. Lovely job. They want you all on the red dot.